What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey Malari. So today I'm going to talk about some recent transactions in the MLB. Going to mainly talk about some trades that have gone down recently, and then another episode that I'm going to record today as well. I'm going to talk about the worst contracts in MLB history, including Anthony Rendon's contract, which seems like it'll be ending before this year begins. It seems like Rendon will be heading towards retirement, with potentially the Angels buying out the last year of his contract. So that'll be in the second episode I record today. In the first episode, as I said, I'm going to talk about some trades that have gone down over the past few weeks. We'll start off with the trade between the Orioles and the Angels. The Orioles received left fielder Taylor Ward from the Angels. 2026 season is the last year of team control for Ward, which is a risky move for the O's considering they did trade Grayson Rodriguez in this deal, who has 4 years left of team control, and he'll also be on the Angels now from 2026 through the 2029 season, barring them trading him at some point. So it is a big move here for the Orioles to go and trade Grayson Rodriguez, especially a team that's been struggling pitching-wise since they lost Corbin Burns in the rotation last year. They're trying to figure out who would be their next ace. Trevor Rogers was great this past year. Kyle Bradish is very good as well. Rodriguez is a guy that's battled injuries a lot over the past couple seasons, but with all of the team control he has left on his deal, 4 years left of team control, it's definitely a risk by the Orioles, but the Orioles obviously weren't ready to wait and see if he would be healthy. They obviously know he's been battling a lot of injuries the past couple seasons, and they didn't really believe in his availability, especially if they're trading him for a guy that's on an expiring contract. Taylor Ward is coming off of a 2025 campaign in which he set career bests in doubles with 31, RBIs with 103, and 36 home runs, all three of those being career highs. He did hit 228 with a 792 OPS, did also play in a career-high 157 games this year, so very impressive year overall for Ward. He was definitely one of the bright spots in that Angels lineup, right next to Joe Adell in the outfield. This is an aggressive move by the Orioles because Ward is a good player, and he had a terrific season, but can he replicate that again? The Orioles were missing Anthony Santander from their lineup in 2025. They did let him go in free agency last year and let him walk to Toronto, which had ended up being a major win for the Orioles, it seems, as of now, with Santander really struggling in his first year with injuries and then even struggling when he was on the field for the Blue Jays. But the Orioles never replaced Santander's production and his power in their lineup. So this is why they go out and get Taylor Ward, a guy that can hit home runs and also help out getting guys across when they're in scoring position. Ward will help the Orioles as well against left-handed pitching. He had a 262 batting average and a 918 OPS against left-handed pitchers in 2025. That's something that the Orioles wanted to target and get this offseason, and obviously they go out and get that now with Ward. In return, like I mentioned, the Angels are receiving right-handed pitcher Grayson Rodriguez. He hasn't pitched in a major league game since August of 2024, has had nagging injuries during his pro career, basically the entire time he's been in Baltimore. With that being said, the talent is still there. He was a top prospect in Baltimore's organization at one point for a reason. His fastball can get up to 100 miles per hour, has a strong changeup, which actually held batters to a 161 batting average in 2024. Overall, in his career, he's made 43 starts. He's still very young, only 26 years old. In those 43 career starts, a 20-8 record, 20 wins, 8 losses, with a 4.11 ERA, 259 strikeouts, and 238 and two-thirds innings pitched, with a 1.29 WHIP and a 3.80 FIP. He's only 26 years old, and with 4 years of team control, the Angels definitely made this move with the hope of landing their ace of the future, which is definitely a possibility considering his talent level. People are always very critical of Perry Minasian and some of the moves he's made as the Angels GM, but this is a high upside move for the Angels. I would consider this a no-brainer move, especially considering Ward is on the last year of his contract, coming off a big-time year last year, and the Angels weren't going to give him a new deal, so they basically cashed in on Ward's production from this past year. Knowing they weren't going to re-sign him, they end up getting a former top prospect in Major League Baseball, a right-handed pitcher that's only 26 years old with a lot of high upside. As I mentioned, the injuries definitely are a major risk here, but if Rodriguez plays to his potential, this would be an absolute steal for the Angels. Yes, Ward had a great year last year and is definitely a beloved baseball player for the fan base in Anaheim. But the reality is that the Angels were not going to pay him on a new contract, so cashing in for a young and talented pitcher is definitely a big-time splash. Like I mentioned, there were definitely injury risks with Rodriguez, but at the same time, this Angels organization has been looking for starting pitching that they could build around, and when you can go out and get a guy like Rodriguez, his talent level and the potential for him to be their ace of the future, this move definitely made sense. So I think this is a win here for the Angels. I do think it makes sense for the Orioles as well, going out and getting a power bat that can replace what Santander did for them them in the 2024 season. At the same time, Ward is a guy that did just have career bests in RBIs, doubles, home runs, and games played in 2025. Can he do that again in 2026 is the question. I think it's a gamble there for the Orioles, but the Orioles are definitely upset with the way they performed in the 2025 season, so they were going to go out and be aggressive this offseason. I expect them to be aggressive in free agency as well. Another move went down between the Rangers and the Mets. Marcus Semien getting traded from the Texas Rangers to the New York Mets in exchange for Brandon Nimmo, an outfielder for the New York Mets. He is now on the move and will be playing in Texas next year. Semien is a second baseman that has had a rough last couple seasons. He signed a 7-year, $175 million deal with the Rangers back in the 2021 offseason. He has struggled the last few seasons for Texas, and I'll get into those numbers in just a second, but he was a World Series champion with this Rangers team back in 2023, bringing home the first World Series title in Texas Rangers franchise history. So at the end of the day, even if he did struggle these last couple seasons, and even if he doesn't really net a great return, even if Nimmo struggles in Texas after this deal is all said and done, it is still important to note he was a big reason they won the World Series title back in 2023 alongside Corey Seager, who he signed with in free agency. They both went in the same offseason to the Texas Rangers. The Rangers basically paid just about $500 million to land both of those two guys in Texas in the same offseason, and they were a big reason they won the World Series title. So at the end of the day, even if things don't work out in the future here with the return of Brandon Nimmo, and even with Marcus Semien struggling over his last couple seasons in Texas, he did help them win their first ring, so at the end of the day, he was worth every penny when you look at it from that perspective. So Semien is now owed $72 million over the next 3 seasons. He's 35 years old already. He had 15 home runs in the 2025 season alongside a .230 batting average, a .669 OPS, 62 runs batted in, and an 89 weighted runs created plus. He's a 3-time All-Star, and like I mentioned, a World Series champion, but he had an under 700 OPS in each of the last 2 seasons, only hit 15 home runs in 2025. He's regressed offensively in each of the last 3 seasons in OPS, average, slugging percentage, on-base percentage, home runs, runs batted in, and runs scored. He's still a good defensive infielder, which is something that the Mets do need in their lineup, but I do think he's on the tail end of his career here, and he's not really going to put up big-time numbers that warrant like the $72 million he's supposed to get over the next 3 seasons. I do think that's a tougher return for the Mets, since I think Semien, if he were to return to the form he was 3 years ago and 4 years ago, this deal is a great move here for the New York Mets. If you look at Semien's numbers, though, over the last 3 years, he has started declining, and I don't know if his numbers are ever going to jump back to where he was a few years ago. Like I said, he's regressed offensively in each of the last 3 years in OPS, average, slugging, on base, home runs, RBIs, and runs scored. I do think that's a concern in my opinion, but the Mets obviously were willing to take this risk. They did trade Brandon Nimmo in this deal to the Rangers, who has $101 million left on his deal over the next 5 seasons. Nimmo was currently 32 years old. He had a career high in home runs in 2025 with 25 home runs, also career high in runs batted in with 92. Had a .262 batting average and a .114 weighted runs created plus in 2025. This does open up an outfield spot for the Mets and some future money as well, with Nimmo being owed $101 million and Semien being owed $72 million. I don't think really the difference in money there is that big of a deal, especially considering Steve Cohen has proven it time and time again. He's not afraid to open up the checkbook and give out a big-time payday. I do think when you look at this position, though, opening up an outfield spot here for the Mets, I think this is going to potentially open up a spot for them to go out and get either Kyle Tucker or Cody Bellinger in free agency, or maybe pursue a Jarren Duran trade as well. Brandon Nimmo, this is definitely a loss in their lineup power-wise. He hit 20-plus home runs in 3 straight seasons for the Mets and was definitely a fan favorite in New York. I'd imagine this is the end of the Jeff McNeil era in Queens as well. I think they'll go out and move him now after this deal is now over with, now with Semien being probably the second baseman at the start of next season. Honestly, I'm not really too sure who wins this trade. If the Mets go all in and they get Kyle Tucker in free agency, who is my number 1 free agent, this move is definitely a W. It does depend on Semien bouncing back as well, though. As of right now, I would give the Rangers the slight edge as a winner in this deal. I think Nimmo has a little bit more left in the tank, especially offensively, than Semien does at this point. I'd love to see Semien bounce back. I've always been a fan of his game, but the last few seasons he has regressed, like I already noted, and I just have more confidence in Nimmo at this point than I do Semien. So I would say this is probably a slight W here for the Rangers. If Semien returned to form, what he was 3 years ago, This would be a major W for the Mets. But considering where he's at age-wise at 35 years old and is already regressing, I think this is a risky move here for the New York Mets organization. I know this does now open up an outfield spot for them to go out and get Bellinger, Tucker, or potentially a trade for Jarren Duran. But I do think this move is just tough considering where each of these two guys are now at offensively in their careers. Nimmo is a better offensive player right now than Marcus Semien is. Does that mean Semien can't bounce back and return to form? No, that obviously isn't the case. Every single year is a new year with a clean slate, so potentially he could bounce back and be the player he once was, and I would love to see that happen. I am a fan of Semien, and I do like the New York Mets organization. I like the Rangers organization as well. I like players on each of these two teams, but I think with Semien being 35 years old, age is definitely a concern, and the lack of offensive consistency over the last few years, and obviously a downtrend in his offensive production is a worry here for me. So I'm going to give the Rangers a W over the Mets in this deal. Semien in 12 career games at Citi Field hit .308 for a batting average with an .884 OPS, 3 home runs, and 7 RBIs. Nimmo in 3 career games at Globe Life Field has 2 home runs, 5 runs batted in, and a .1462 OPS. We'll see how this deal works out, but as of right now, I think the Rangers have a win in this deal because I think right now, Semien is not as good offensively as Nimmo was this past year. The numbers prove it, and also you look at age as a concern and the steady decline in Semien's career. I'm going to give the Rangers the win in this deal. And then the last deal I'm going to mention is a deal between the Red Sox and the St. Louis Cardinals. They completed a deal about a week ago. The Red Sox landed right-handed pitcher Sonny Gray from St. Louis and sent right-handed pitcher Richard Fitz and Boston's number 5 prospect, a left-handed pitcher named Brandon Clarke, to St. Louis in this deal. The Cardinals are also sending $20 million to Boston to cover part of Gray's salary for this upcoming season. Per Ian Brown of MLB.com, St. Louis is sending $20 million to cover part of Gray's salary for 2026 and the buyout of his $30 million club option for 2027. Upon completion of the trade, and presumably for CBT reasons, Boston and Gray negotiated Gray's $35 million salary for 2026 to $31 million, while increasing the buyout of his option from $5 million to $10 million. And credit to Ian Brown there with that quote from an article from him. This trade, I think, does make sense for the Red Sox. They do need to add starting pitching and definitely get a guy that can replace Lucas Giolito in the rotation, considering Giolito is probably gone in free agency. It makes sense that they go out and try to replace him with a guy like Sonny Gray, who is similar to Giolito in many ways, I'd say. Gray's probably been more consistent over the last 3 or 4 years than Giolito's been. Giolito was really good this past year for the Red Sox, but in previous seasons before that, battled injuries and struggled during the end of his time in Chicago with the White Sox, struggled with the Angels, and struggled with the Guardians. Just wasn't really the same player towards the end of that White Sox tenure than he was towards the beginning of it. But this past year had a really good bounce-back year for the Red Sox, was a revival season for Giolito. But I don't think the Red Sox wanted to pay him in free agency, just knowing that there was a major injury risk with him, considering he's had arm injuries in his career. They probably didn't know if he would have the same production next year that he did have this past season. So they went out and got Sonny Gray, who's been probably more consistent over the last 3 seasons than Giolito. Gray has a very effective sweeper, holding batters to a .130 batting average and a .188 slugging percentage since the start of the 2023 season. Both of those numbers are the lowest in the MLB against a single pitch type with a minimum of 500 plate appearances, and that's a stat from MLB Stats on X. I'm excited to see what Andrew Bailey could do with his pitch arsenal. I think his sweep, as I said, is a very effective pitch, and I think that is something we'll see him go to a lot in this Red Sox rotation. Andrew Bailey's been great with the Red Sox pitchers over the last few years and helping them really figure out which off-speed pitches to use in certain situations. I think Sonny Gray is going to be good in this Red Sox rotation. He had a 3.39 FIP in 2025, which was 11th among qualified starting pitchers. He had a 27% strikeout rate, which was tied for 6th among qualified starting pitchers, and had a 5% walk rate, which was tied for 2nd among qualified starting pitchers. Also adding in a 43.9% ground ball rate in 2025, which was 19th best in the MLB, with Garrett Crochet in 11th and Brian Bayo in 10th. So obviously the Red Sox now have 3 guys that are in the top 20 of ground ball percentage in the MLB, which is something that Andrew Bailey is probably going to be happy with. From 2023 to 2025, Gray had a Fangraphs win above replacement total of 5.4, 3.8, and 3.6. All of those are very good WAR totals over those 3 years. Still a reliable starting pitcher. Gray is one of 3 MLB pitchers with 400-plus strikeouts and fewer than 80 walks over the last 2 seasons, joining Tarik Skubal, the AL Cy Young winner from this past year. Now he's won 2 Cy Youngs in a row in the AL, and also joining Garrett Crochet in that very impressive class of MLB pitchers with 400-plus strikeouts and less than 80 walks over the past 2 seasons. The Red Sox, as I said, are also receiving $20 million from St. Louis to cover part of Gray's salary for this upcoming season. What the Red Sox gave up in return was Brandon Clarke, a left-handed pitching prospect who's the 5th best prospect in Boston's organization, was a former 5th-round pick for the Red Sox in the 2024 MLB draft. Clarke has a fastball that gets up to 100 miles per hour. He did have some success in the minor leagues, especially with the strikeout total. He averages 14.2 strikeouts per 9 innings, which definitely shows his big-time potential as a strikeout pitcher. 60 strikeouts and 38 minor league innings pitched in his career. He had a 4.03 ERA between low A and high A in 2025. He's only 22 years old. I like this pickup a lot for St. Louis. I think it's very under the radar. This is a very good get by Chaim Bloom considering what Clarke could be in the future. I think a lot of the time you see prospects get traded and no one really knows much about them. And then 2 or 3 years down the line, that guy might make it up to the major leagues after being a throw-in in a trade like this, and he ends up being a very successful pitcher. I do like this get for Chaim Bloom in St. Louis. And then in return as well, the Red Sox also sent Richard Fitts, who is under team control through the 2031 season. He's a right-handed pitcher for the Red Sox. He was 2-5 in 15 appearances in the MLB, making 14 starts over 2 seasons with a 3.97 ERA, a 5.02 FIP, and 6.7 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched. He did have an arm injury with some inflation, which ended his 2025 season early, and I think that's probably a concern here for the Red Sox. With that being said, he's only 25 years old, still a lot of baseball in front of him, and considering he's under team control through the 2031 season, this is a very good return for Chaim Bloom in St. Louis. Considering they're probably in the midst of a rebuild for the next year or so, this is a great move to go out and replenish the potential starting rotation for years to come. I do like this move here for St. Louis. I also like the move for the Red Sox. I think it makes sense for the Red Sox to go out and get Sonny Gray to replace Lucas Giolito and get another reliable starting pitcher in this rotation, especially considering St. Louis is sending $20 million in this deal. It's not a bad move here for the Red Sox. I think it's a win-win for each side, so I'm going to consider it a win for the Red Sox and also St. Louis in this deal. I'm usually a little hesitant trading prospects and players that are very young that are still under team control through the 2031 season, for example, with Richard Fitts. I probably would have kept Fitts because I liked his potential, but at the same time, if you're going out and you're getting Sonny Gray, who could potentially help you win right now and be a very good number 2 or number 3 in the rotation for the Red Sox next year, it made sense for Craig Breslow and the Red Sox front office to make a move like this. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.